Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bobcat Outsider, the YouTube channel that brings you Bobcat sports from a fan perspective. Last week we only got a quarter and a half of football. Guys, Western Illinois, we see that you guys are featuring your broadcast journalism department in the ads, on the commercials through the course of the game. You got to get that feed together, guys, so you can really showcase that broadcast journalism department. We know it's early in the season. You guys are going to do better. I just know it. Next home game, you guys are on it. So again, the Cats recovered from an onslaught of penalties and mistakes to come up with the 23-14 win in Macomb, Illinois against the Leathernecks. Next week, the Cats are home to welcome the Spartans of Norfolk State. We'll cover both of those games and talk a little bit about the bigger picture in this week's episode of the Bobcat Outsider. First up, the rewind. Last week we talked a little bit about how aggressively the Western Illinois defense was going to be pursuing Montana State's offense, and I think they demonstrated that they really are a fast and aggressively pursuing defense by the fact that they really bottled up Troy Anderson on offense this week. We also talked a little bit about how they were going to be kind of a turnover-hungry defense, always trying to rip that ball out. Well, I think the Cats really won that battle this week, giving up only one fumble to Western Illinois' 2 fumbles and 1 interception. Again, the Bobcats escaped Macomb with that 23-14 victory, the first team to do so in 13 years of Western Illinois' home openers. It was an ugly win, but it was a win nonetheless. Going into the game, Coach Choate was asked whether he thought that they needed to bring their own energy for this one, or if he thought that there would be a good atmosphere. And his answer was that he expected a nice atmosphere because it was their home opener. Well, here's what Coach Choate said when he actually had the opportunity to experience the atmosphere.
There's nothing easy about playing there. Nothing easy at all. The atmosphere's not great. The walking back and forth to the locker room is, we may as well walk back to the field house. It would have been shorter for us than what we had to experience there. And, there's no time to make adjustments. It's basically get there, get the guys hydrated, get them settled down and relaxed, and you got to go back and play again. And that's why they're 12-0. Over the last 12 years, well, I guess they're 12-1 now in non-conference season home openers, including their last 3 Big Sky opponents before we went in there and got the win. That's how bad it was. It was not a great environment. It was not well organized. I don't know anything else to say.
Despite only having 2 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, and 3 quarterback hurries, the defense was actually living in the backfield of the Western Illinois offense. It's just that they were trying to get the ball out quickly, and that new quarterback actually did a very good job of doing that. The offense had great moments, but it was punctuated with penalties and different frustrations. Troy Anderson ended up literally being a non-factor on offense with 7 carries for 0 yards. Here's a little clip of what Coach Choate said specifically about Troy being bottled up.
They had a good scheme. Every time 15 came in the game, they were going to crash and spill. And so, we didn't adjust as quickly as we probably should have on that. I think there's some things that we could have done to take advantage of them overplaying the perimeter of our offense when we had him in the game.
With Afonso out and Troy bottled up, Logan Jones came through big in a breakout game. On 21 carries, he was able to get 167 yards, which averages to 8 yards per carry. I also thought Demarius Hosey looked really good when he stepped in there. In my opinion, he actually looked somewhat like Afonso. He just ran really hard, never stopped, and just blew through some of those tackles. Tristan Bailey hits 3 for 3 on field goals, making up the 9-point difference in the score. His 3 made field goals rounds him out to a perfect 7 for 7 against Western Illinois. Coach Choate says Western Illinois is going to be happy that they're not playing him ever again. Lane Sumner with a rare chance to return the ball, and he houses it, only to be turned around by a penalty. But despite the amazing 80-plus yard run from Logan Jones and a Lane Sumner return for a touchdown, the play of the game was Damian Washington's pick 6, where he ran about 3 miles to get 90 yards and a touchdown. Damian Washington, you did an amazing job. I didn't see the penalty. I'm so sorry, man. I can't even imagine. But hey, you got that one in our eyes. Here's what Coach Choate said about those penalties that took back all those great plays.
It was a sloppy game. We had 12 penalties for 92 yards, but here's the real story on those 12 penalties. It took away 2 touchdowns, a possession, and 263 yards of field position. So that had a huge impact in this game. 21 flags is too many in any contest. It's too many. And so regardless of who they're being thrown on, at some point in time, you got to let kids play. And so that was frustrating. It's very difficult to overcome the momentum that's created in those situations, and then it's gone.
This was a game that felt really ugly, but that might have been largely due to these two-hand touch refs. You got to let them play, boys. This is too many penalties against a team that really doesn't get penalized that much because they play very clean. In the end, a win is a win, a 2-score win is a good win, and a 2-score win against a Missouri Valley team that hasn't allowed an opponent to win in their home opener in 13 years, well, that's a really good win. So out of this game, Tristan Bailey earned all Big Sky honors for special teams. Bryce Stirk continues to lead the Big Sky in sacks with 5, and the Cats move up from number 10 to number 8 in the Stats FCS poll. Now, on to the scouting report. Next week, the Cats host the Spartans of Norfolk State in the annual Stripe the Stadium game. These guys obviously hail from Norfolk, Virginia, and you're hearing that right. That's the correct pronunciation for people who haven't been to Norfolk or don't have friends that are from the area. A shout out to Jacquay Allen. These guys play in Dick Price Stadium. This will be the first matchup between the two teams and Montana State's first game against any team from the MEAC, as well as Norfolk State's first game against any team in the Big Sky. This will also be Norfolk State's first game against a team in the FCS this year. They had 2 games against FBS opponents, their first and their third, and their second game was against Division II Virginia State. The Spartans opened the season against FBS Old Dominion. They gave them a run for their money. The Spartans led 20-17 with less than 6 minutes left in that game. This team is very dangerous if you let them into the red zone. They've made the trip 8 times this season and scored every time. The Spartans play a sort of bend but don't break defense that could cost them late in the game if Montana State is able to get their run game going and really wear those guys out. And now for some key matchups. The Spartans head coach Latrell Scott sees controlling the line of scrimmage as an important key to this game. He says that their offense has to stay on the field to help their defense out a little bit. And I 100% agree with this. If these guys want to play bend but don't break against a team that's happy to take, 5 to 7 yards on run plays, then they're going to get tired if they're not able to get off the field and if the offense isn't able to take the field and keep it for a good chunk of time. I think this game is going to be a favorable matchup for MSU. Coastal Carolina had somewhere north of 400 yards rushing in their game against them. Obviously, we're not an FBS team, but it just gives you an idea. These guys are very fast. They got great athletes, but maybe being bigger and more physical is not their strong suit, and that's right where we want to play. And so if they're happy to sit back and not load up the box against Montana State, then they might be in for a long day. All right, let's talk some players to know. They have a junior quarterback named Juwan Carter. He wears number 8, and he hails from Richmond, Virginia. Coach Cho says everything goes through this guy. He compares him to Chris Murray, and he really is a spectacular player. On top of that ability to make a really great play when the play breaks down, this kid is really great in the passing game. He just, with this last game against Coastal Carolina, took the number 2 spot all time for Norfolk State's passing yards. He also placed second in the MEAC for passing yards last year. You'll also want to keep your eye on redshirt freshman DeKendall James. He wears number 15 and hails from Chesapeake, Virginia. He's their leading receiver with 9 catches for 128 yards and a touchdown. On defense, keep your eye out for senior middle linebacker Nigel Chavis. He wears number 9 and hails from Richmond, Virginia. Last year, he made first team all-conference in the MEAC, and he led Norfolk State with 5.5 sacks and 13 tackles for loss. And now for some keys to the game. Montana State really needs to know where Juwan Carter is at all times. He is going to be the difference maker in this game if Norfolk State hopes to defeat the Bobcats. They need to be hitting him early and often and make him earn every yard the hard way. MSU also needs to keep that ground attack churning. They got to wear those guys out and take advantage of that bend but don't break style so that late in the game when those guys start to feel that altitude and start to wear thin, that's when MSU is going to start to avalanche them with those points. A couple points to fans. This week is Stripe the Stadium week, so be sure to check your tickets for which section you're in, and then just wear the color corresponding to that section. If you can't make it to the game, it's going to be broadcast on all the ABC Montana stations, with the exception of Billings, where it will be on Color 8. And now it's time for our new segment, Across the Divide, where we take a look at our foes from over the hill. The Griz defense looked better in a 35-3 loss against Oregon at Autzen Stadium. Jerry Louis McGee just moved into the #1 spot all time for Griz receptions. So they cover the spread and move one spot from number 20 to number 19 in this week's FCS stats poll. This week, the Griz also face an Eastern Seaboard opponent in the Monmouth Hawks from West Long Branch, New Jersey. This is a team that the Cats played and beat 42-24 in the Gold Rush game of 2013. And now another new segment, a bird's eye view, where we take a look at the broader context and implications for the Big Sky Conference and the FCS in general. So this week moves the Cats into the realm of seeded teams. This is what Jeff Choate wanted to do to make sure that we could establish that we get that first week bye when we go into the playoffs. Now, obviously, there's a long road ahead. There's a lot of winning left to be done if you still want to maintain that top 8 spot. But getting into there early in the season really makes a big difference for the Cats. Teams across the Big Sky are showing that they are tough and that this is going to be one of the toughest conferences this year, if not the best conference. Idaho plays Wyoming really tight in a 21-16 loss. You got to check out the circus catch that Hayden Hatton made in that game. Weber nearly defeats FBS Nevada. UC Davis looks more like themselves as they roll past Lehigh 41-13. And Montana shows that they can play some pretty darn good defense at Oregon. Eastern Washington, one of the few teams from the Big Sky with a showing not as good as they had hoped to have against Jacksonville State. They dropped that game late. It was a really competitive game, and I thought that Eastern had a good showing, but it dropped them out of that top 10 in the polls from number 4 down to number 11. Also, Maine got beat by Towson this week, which dropped them behind the Bobcats. So both of those moves helped the Bobcats to improve to that number 8 spot. Okay, and now for outsider opinions. This week we're going to talk a little bit about how many is the right number of teams to get into the playoffs. So obviously 24 teams is a lot of teams for the playoffs, but compare that to 4, right? So there's a big difference there. So for me, the whole thing, it hinges on one thing, and that's my opinion, is that the whole point of the playoffs, and the only point of the playoffs, is to determine the national champion without question. That way you have an undisputed national champion, no one can complain about it. So if that's the case, if that's really true, and obviously that's just my opinion, but if the whole point of the playoffs is just to determine the national champion, then I think that you have to let in the number of teams who have any sort of shot at going through all the way through the playoffs and going the distance. So the opposite of that would be the kind of thing that FBS used to do, where they would say, well, here's the national championship game, and they have 2 teams play each other that they think are the top 2 teams, and then they look terrible compared to a couple other teams that play in maybe the Rose Bowl or something else, and then they're essentially just kind of picking who the national champion is. That's insane. So how many teams have a legitimate shot? Now, I'm talking about way outside shot, the kind of thing that March Madness gives people the opportunity to do, like the Cinderella story shot. Now, football is not basketball, and you're not going to have teams from a 64-team field getting a chance to actually win the championship. You're not going to have teams from a 32-team field with a chance. But those top 16 or so teams, every once in a long while, you're going to have a team that punches above their weight, and they're able to demonstrate that they deserved the shot, and they make it to the championship. Now, how do you know that you have the right 16 teams? Well, pick 24 teams, and anyone that doesn't make 24 teams did not have a shot at being the top 26 and definitely doesn't have a shot at winning the championship. Which brings me to my next point, and this is really important. If you are on the bubble of a 24-team field, you don't have a right or an entitlement to be in the playoffs. The only reason you should go to the playoffs is because you have a real chance at winning the championship. So if you can't crack a 24-team field for the playoffs, you just can't sit back and complain about not making it. Now, obviously, we see that people do complain that they don't get that extra game or 2 in the playoffs, but really you don't have any entitlement if you haven't done what you need to do during the season to demonstrate, yes, we are one of the top teams. We are someone with a real chance to win the championship. And FBS, don't even pretend that what you have is even close to fair with those 4 teams. What do you think? How many teams should be in the playoffs? Can you be on the bubble and still be entitled to a berth in the playoffs? Am I wrong about the FBS 4-team playoff? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, the Bobcat Outsider is brought to you by Adventures of Shane and Laura, my YouTube channel where my wife and I share all of our travels and hikes and backpacking trips around Montana and then up into Banff and national parks around the country. We invite you guys to check it out if you like that kind of thing. If you're outside of Montana, you just kind of miss Montana a little bit, check it out. I'll leave a link in the end screen. I would love to air and answer maybe some of your questions. If you have any, you can leave them in the comments below, or you can send them to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @ShaneDriscoll. Be sure to follow me if you want late-breaking news from the Bobcats. And you can also submit your questions through Bobcat Nation, the Montana State Bobcats fan message board. Now for the plug of the week, I want to plug a couple different things. The first thing is Tubs at the Club. If you aren't listening to Tubs at the Club, it's the Idaho Vandals fan podcast, and Chris Hammond, Brian Marceau, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Brian, and the gang, they do a great job of not only covering Vandals football, but looking around the Big Sky, and I really respect what those guys understand about the FCS and the Big Sky specifically. They don't just kind of look at the scores and say, oh, well, that team did such and such. They have a very strong knowledge of the Big Sky and of the FCS. And you can always find the most in-depth, well-researched, and thorough coverage of the Big Sky at Skyline Sports. The website is skylinesportsmt.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like. If you want to see more like it, be sure to subscribe. Click the little bell button, and that gives you notifications so you can be the first to be notified when our videos come out. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. We'll catch you next time, and until then, go Cats!